So now it's my pleasure to introduce to you our speaker for today, whom I believe all of you know. Mandy has been affiliated with the Massillon Museum since 2004. She graduated from Penn State with a bachelor's degree in history. She's won many awards for her photography, has produced documentary works for the museum, and was instrumental in the most recent installment, the summer installment rather, in the Altman Health Foundation Gallery, Missing History of Massillon Under African American Stories. She appeared in 2015 on Travel Channel's Mysteries of the Museum, telling the history of Jacob Coxey's 1894 protest march from Massillon to Washington, was a plenary speaker for the Society of Ohio Archivists, and her book, Early Massillon and Lost Kendall, was published by Arcadia in 2017 and is available in the museum shop for purchase. I'm sure she'd autograph it for you as well today. Mandy serves on Massillon Historic Preservation Commission, is secretary of Spring Hill Historic Home Board of Trustees, is treasurer for the Charity School of Kendall Foundation, and in 2018 was inducted into the YWCA Canton Women's Hall of Fame.
Yay, thank you guys so much. I'm excited. Alex mentioned that I get to be the first brown bag speaker with this new beautiful logo podium, so huzzah. So when people like Rudy Turkle and Joe Herrick walk through the door, and Jim Walker, who have a lot of history in their brains, that doesn't make me nearly as nervous as my parents sitting in the front row with my kids. So, oh, thanks, Donovan. That's so great. And that's Donovan. That's my greatest creation right there. He is 4 years old and is here enjoying the brown bag. So, huzzah. Oh my goodness. You have no idea what like the real world is because you're so loved here. I love you, buddy. So obviously I am not going to be able to get through all 90 years. As Scott Allen Evans at the desk mentioned, if I spent 30 seconds per year, I would get through all of it. But there's so many exciting and weird things that have happened in our history, so I want to take you through some of it and why on earth we started a Massillon Museum in the first place. So walk with me in this lovely journey through technology that Rose and I have worked out, hopefully, to work. So our community actually was started in 1812 with the founding of Kendall, which is our northeast section of Massillon. And a gentleman named James Duncan came from Kendall and then moved down to this area and won a few bids for the Ohio and Erie Canal. And so the canal was going to be the great big commerce that was going to bring people from far and wide. We're going to need hotels and dry goods stores and all of these things. So he I don't have a laser pointer, you guys. So he platted this Massillon thing with the canal straight through the center there. You might not quite recognize it today as they have moved the river since this 1826 plat. So now it's a little straighter. But James Duncan went and made his thing equal to the river, so it is not a perfect north and south. Kendall, perfect north and south. Massillon, funky and askew. There is a spot in Massillon where they like kind of converge, and so when you're like, why does this road do a weird thing? That's why, because those two communities ran into each other. Fun fact, William Henry on the west side actually got here first. And most of his mills actually fed the Kendall houses that were being built, but he didn't actually plat anything until 1831 with West Massillon. So we have all of this amazing history, super amazing stuff, things that are affected by the War of 1812, things that parallel the canal history. You can imagine the kinds of things that our community has produced and saved over time. Bazillions of stories, amazing stuff, weird, crazy costumes. This is one of my favorite photos in the collection. Those are spoons that are making up a corset. Like, yes, this is amazing. So all of these magical things were in people's basements, their attics, here, there, and everywhere, but there was no like central place to donate that stuff for people to enjoy. I gotta turn it on, that's what it is. Yeah. Thank you. And this is why I've handed the reins of technology person to Brandon, not myself, because clearly I'm getting too old for this. So it's fine. So all of this really cool stuff in everybody's attics, their basements. We celebrate Massillon's centennial in 1926, and it was at this point we had a year-long celebration where people started to realize, like, whoa, wait, I've got great-grandma's quilt. Hey, I've got an original daguerreotype from Abel Fletcher. Like, maybe we should pull this stuff out and have some exhibits in some storefronts. We'll show some of Abraham Pearlie Pease's ethnographic collection. They've got this super sweet souvenir key thing, which I feel like every one of us has to have somewhere in a shoebox. It seems like everyone in Massillon purchased one, but they decorated the town, they had centennial headquarters, they had pageants, Mardi Gras celebrations, so much cool stuff. So they had parades, they decorated all of downtown, there were just flags everywhere. You might recognize the McClymans or the Massillon building here, decorated quite significantly, and the Lincoln Theater, which is still here. And they had a huge parade, so they got to celebrate all the businesses that were in Massillon. You've got Hess Snyder, they've got 1826 stove, and then they showed off their boomer furnace. Ooh, look at how technology has gotten us here 100 years later. We've got the Elam Company was a grocery store. We've got a huge giant banana. I mean, a banana float. This is epic wins, people. So we realized, like, hey, this is pretty great. And what's so interesting is that a gentleman from Canton actually wrote this article from the Canton Daily News. At the present time, there are the Dr. A.P.L. Pease collection now in the balcony of the McClymans Library, and a shell display of the Massillon Burroughs Nature Society in the library of the Massillon Women's Club. So the Massillon Women's Club actually displayed some early things as well. For a number of years, the Historical Committee of the Massillon High School Alumni Association has held a very valuable collection of relics and historic articles. So the Alumni Association had some things, the Women's Club had some things, the library had some things, but again, they weren't all, in theory, like in one spot. So they needed a display space for those to properly be shared with everybody, because the Alumni Association isn't exactly an open to the public 5 days a week kind of an institution. So, you know, we're starting to celebrate all of these historical things, so what do? So Bessie Skinner was the editor for the Evening Independent, which would be later the Independent, and a couple of name changes. But she wrote this wonderful book in 1928 called Massillon Once Upon a Time. So she started to compile all of these histories into a history book. And she also wrote the wonderful lyrics to Keep Massillon on the Map. I do have a copy up here if you should wish to see it. And I'm handling this because there is literally a box of 100 of them upstairs, so this is my touchable copy that people can look at. Some of the lyrics are the most fantastic I've ever heard. Where once there was a wilderness, our fathers made a town. Now we have a city, a birthright to hand down. We would make it better. We all must lend a hand. For present and for future, be Massillons to command. So standing at attention and fearing no mishap, together we march forward to keep Massillon on the map. Right? Doesn't that just fill you with some great inspiration? So how do we keep it on the map? We found a museum, of course. So at the time, we had the McClymans Library, which was in the former Nahum Russell home on 4th Street, still standing just next to the Women's Club. But I mean, what a tiny space for a library that's going to be serving hundreds of kids and adults. You know, where would we fit into this space? We wouldn't. So the interesting thing is that there's always some drama, but you never hear about it because it's all tucked away in these beautiful little newspaper clippings. There's trouble in the Library Association. Donors who haven't donated. The harsh heirs say that the Russell heirs are being unfair. So some kind of magical fight. I didn't delve too deeply into it because it sounded really awesome, but I'd get distracted from my purpose of, celebrating our history. So at any point, anyone who wants to take a look at these great scrapbooks, we've got quite a few upstairs. So the library fulfilled its function inside the McClymans Library on 4th Street. But you can see it's kind of cramped and not a whole lot of space. Literally, like the dining room of the Nahum Russell home is just a reading room. It looks like fun. Like it totally looks like an 1899 place I'd like to go visit. And again, the A.P.L. Pease collection, this would go on to be one of our founding collections, which we have some pieces on display from right now on our second floor, should you want to go see it. But this was kind of on display for a really long time. They had put it on display inside the library since it opened in 1899, and when the museum opened, this was the same stuff. So everybody came to the museum expecting to see something exciting, and they're like, nah, it's the same stuff we've seen forever. Show us something new. So the Pease stuff is like a very, important piece of our history, but they wanted to see something else. So how on earth are we going to get this thing started? So Frank and Annie Steese Baldwin were living in the home of Massillon's founder, James Duncan. It had been passed through the generations over 100 years, and they decided that upon their passing, they should donate this house to the community, and that if they should save the home, there would be funding there for the museum and the library to get started. So if they decide to keep the Duncan home, they get $25,000. But if they decide to tear it down, they don't get that money. So 1931, we're like right in the start of the Great Depression. So your next attempt is to try and pass a tax levy in the middle of a depression. So a lot of challenges for the library board who was given this gift in 1931. So the deal was that within 2 years, they had to open something. And time started to run out because they really couldn't decide what to do. Do we move the Duncan house and save it? Do we move into it? Do we expand it? What do we do? So they said, well, we better open something so we don't lose this opportunity. So they just kind of put some things into the Baldwin home and kept their fingers crossed. One of my absolute favorite quotes that talks about the opening of the Massillon Museum, we believe it was C.E. Chittister, who was the editor for The Independent at the time, wrote an article called Hail Massillon's Museum. The opening of the museum is destined to mark the beginning of a new activity in Massillon. It should be carried on with vigor, dispatch, and with immeasurable joy. And we are still doing that today. So this is Christian Botts. He was the very first person to sign the guest book when we opened in '33. He also loaned all of his American Indian artifacts. He was very crucial in helping Fort Lawrence to get started. And he was a firefighter. He did Boy Scout programs, an all-around amazing community guy. And so there we are. So this is kind of cool because there's a lot of photos of the Duncan Baldwin home, but right here you can see the word museum. So we started out as the Baldwin Museum, again, we better get something on the wall. And then we all thought about like what we should actually do. So these are really the crucial people in the very beginning of the museum. So we have Frank Harrison, who was a young artist who really wanted to help and research and create. Albert Heiss, who's very interested in history. His brother was a history teacher at the high school. He really understood art and what people wanted to see. He gave the start through the museum to people like Clyde Singer, David Hostetler, Raphael Gleitzman, a lot of important regional artists who went on to great things. Irene McLean Wales, she was living up at Spring Hill Historic Home, which would become a historic home. And so she was very, very interested in all the earliest things from Massillon, and she was crucial on the museum committee. And Betty Traphagen, I don't know much more about her other than she was there doing important things and helping the crew. So I hope to learn more about her over time.
And then around 33, in order to fulfill the conditions of Mrs. Baldwin's will, why the library had to open the house as a museum because bond issues for the library failed. And I had been on the museum committee from the very beginning, and the museum had been opened as with the Pease collection on the two south rooms, and Captain Botts's collection of mostly Indian artifacts in the one north room, and they had the rest of the house, 2 bedrooms, the kitchen, and the living room. But The committee saw that that wasn't very successful, that is, it wasn't drawing the people, and so we started the idea of changing exhibits with Ruth Hubbard. And after a very short period of Evelyn Ellsworth from the Brooklyn Museum.
So I just wanted you to hear Albert Heiss's voice, because it's always nice to hear from the people who were actually there. So there is a 3 hours worth interview with Albert Heiss. If anybody wants to see it, it's all available on our website. If you search for Albert Heiss, he is on there. So he talks through all the time at the museum, his family history, and all kinds of things. So good stuff. So some of the very first exhibits that they started changing over after they realized that the peace stuff was kind of getting boring, they started to make little vignette rooms because they had a lot of pioneer artifacts. The Boy Scouts actually put together a coal mining exhibit on the basement floor, and they would actually give tours to people. The big attraction was that there was actual coal in the bin. I don't know why that was such a big deal, but great. The Ohio Artists and Craftsmen Juried exhibit started about this time, and that kind of later morphed into the Stark County Artists exhibition. So that has been going for more than 80 years throughout Massillon's history. The Ella O. Shoemaker Shell Collection, that was a huge collection. The Burroughs Nature Club came through and they all labeled the shells. They had a science room. And science was really kind of the focus. Ruth Hubbard, who was director for about a year or two, came from a science museum, so our focus really started to move towards that. So this is actually sitting up here, and I do want to, if you want to come up and see it, but not touch it, please. But this is actually something that the library just found for us. They were poking around in all of the weird storage spaces that the library has, which you can imagine after living in a place for 80 years, stuff gets tucked away. So they were up above the portico in the library and said, hey, this says from the Massillon Museum. And she's like, Sherry came down and said, did you want this? And I was like, yes, I do, because this was made by Frank Harrison. Frank Harrison, bless him, actually went around to the schools and then was able to kind of take a museum in a box to the schools and teach them about things like coal mining. So it's this nice little compact, cute thing, but he painted it himself. There's little paintings on the back. There's photographs of coal mines and little samples of coal there that you can see. So a weird find that has been waiting a while to come home, but I'm so glad it's back. So thanks for checking out the weird porch storage at the library. So Ruth Hubbard, we really don't know a whole lot about her. I actually did contact the Cleveland Museum of Natural History to see if we could find out more, but she was there, she was here, and then she went on to teach at the school systems. But she was very instrumental in getting the exhibits changed over, which was a huge thing, obviously, as Albert Heiss said. So she would return, she left specifically because she had asked for a raise. It was the Great Depression. They were actually paying for her gas and meat and soap for her to survive. She was living in the Duncan Baldwin home for a time. So, some very interesting conditions as you're trying to start this whole museum from scratch. So just thought that was great. I did find a lovely article from Ruth Hubbard's time, which I thought I would read for you. 16 new exhibits today were donated to the Baldwin Museum. The donor was a female garter snake, 20 inches long, which gave birth to 16 baby snakes. Each was 6 or 7 inches long. Miss Ruth Hubbard, the director of the museum, was at the point of releasing the mother when she observed the stork perched upon the jar, which was the reptile's home. Presently, the first of the 16 tuplets appeared, and soon the whole brood, herd, or whatever you call it, were wiggling around, climbing on the sides of the jar, and proving generally incorrigible. So I love that the reporters had a good sense of humor when they reported on such things. So, one of the really cool things she did too was the 1935 industrial exhibit. So during the Great Depression, trying to highlight Massillon products and all the amazing things that our Massillon companies did. So a snapshot in time. We have letters from all of the companies that participated and loaned their artifacts, like Enterprise Aluminum, Eaton Manufacturing, National Garment Company, Union Drawn Steel. And they actually had some WPA murals by John Lundy installed in the rotunda of the library. So this was a really cool and fabulous, thing that Ruth Hubbard was able to provide the community at that time. So these are literally photos of like the very, very first exhibit. So members of the Women's Club came over to help us set things up. They were incredibly crucial in getting all of these exhibits set up. So set up all the things you have and do your best. So obviously we all kind of made a plan. Things started to expand and get covered by the newspaper. We had a good relationship with Cleveland, so the Cleveland Plain Dealer there in the center, they covered us quite a bit, which is great because that got us to a whole new audience. So the problem then became, okay, we finally opened this thing, but now do we save the Duncan home to get that $25,000, or what do we do? So there was this battle ensuing that covers the newspapers. These are just some of them, where people would write their opinion into the newspaper. We need to tear it down. Who needs this old building? Other people are saying, no, we have to save the founder's home. Maybe we can make the building bigger. Maybe we can pick it up and move it. No, there were so many different options. So what the library board finally did after a couple of lawsuits and things and people testing whether or not they could get the money without actually saving the Duncan home, they realized maybe we should just expand the building. So bless you, Albrecht and Wilhelm, for coming up with an architectural design that would give us all something to rally around. So when they passed the bond issue finally, this was the sketch of the Massillon Public Library and Museum, and one on the west side as well. So using some PWA money during the Great Depression, getting this bond issue passed to match that, we actually finally were able to move forward. You may recognize Albrecht and Wilhelm's designs from such things as the post office, which is now the Rodney Klein Stock Market Museum, and the Stark Dry Goods building, which is now the Massillon Museum. So we moved from one Albrecht and Wilhelm building to another. So lots of really great and wonderful buildings across town. So here are their original drawings of the expansion for the library and museum. And obviously there's more drawings than that, but all their little cute details are just really, they're fantastic. So we sent out invitations and finally decided to start laying the cornerstone and expanding the building. The problem with this is that they had to lay off all the staff while they were doing this construction, which, Alex, thank you for not firing us all while we were expanding the museum most recently, because they got rid of everybody. So, all right, so this is, Joe, I believe this is thanks to you, because this is a Snyder family film. There is no sound for this, so we can turn that guy down. So this is the cornerstone laying. There was a parade by the American Legion and the Washington High School Band. There were hundreds of school children who opened the program with a march through Massillon's business district. Several thousand children and adults attended the ceremony. The cornerstone was officially laid by Dr. H.W. Bell, president of the Board of Education. Reverend J.R. Stalker delivered the official address, and it was followed by Sherlock Evans speaking for Mayor Henry Cryer, and several other congratulatory speeches were given. This is the only footage I've ever seen of the cornerstone laying. There's tons of pictures, but I thought that, again, when you've got moving pictures and audio, I want to see it. And watch how they try to slide this stone into place, but it's a massive, massive stone. I don't think that they really thought through how are we going to slide that in while everyone's watching and staring at you? So they make it happen, at least that much. At least they didn't totally embarrass themselves or drop it, and that would have been terrible. Oops. So as you can see, they're all out there on the lawn. They raise a flag. Yay! Celebration. And if you go to the library, that stone is still in there. Supposedly there are photographs of the library and museum stuffed inside, like a proper cornerstone. So someday we'll find some wet paper inside, I assume, is what we'll discover. No time capsule is ever really protected from the elements. So there we are. Ta-da! So we finally opened in 1937, part of it, and then the second part in 1938. So again, you can see on the lawn there that Baldwin Museum sign. And then they realized that the Baldwins didn't really necessarily want recognized. So they removed Baldwin Museum and changed it to Massillon Museum for the community, not just for Annie and Frank Baldwin. So officially the Massillon Museum reopened on Sunday, April 3rd, 1938, and we had a whole museum committee. We were never our own entity until the 1980s, so we were only ever a subcommittee of the library for the first 60 years. Excuse me. So this is our children's department today. Really the thing that you can recognize is the fireplace, which usually has a lot of fun animals and books on it. And look at that card catalog. Is that not the most beautiful thing you've ever seen? I can just smell it. It's just, There's something very visceral about like researching in the card catalog. So. So we had some displays in the basement. Alex, I will point out that these are poster boards that we, I think, stuck some repros in. So, you know, when you start out small, you gotta start somewhere. So obviously we get better over time. So we've got some sweet pegboard happening back here to put things on. So glad we have like legit walls because they were mostly fabric and pegboard. So again, we had to do what we had to do. Now, what I think is so interesting is that like sweet little Massillon, Ohio actually hosted like an insane amount of amazing stuff. These are just like a couple of the bazillions of clippings we've got. Disney cartoons. We actually exhibited original cells from Disney movies, including Snow White, in 1939 and 1942. What? Why did no one take a picture? I can't find a picture of them happening. So if anyone happens to have that in their random scrapbook, I would love to talk to you because there's a researcher trying to find it. So this is all I've got is like, hey, they were here. We exhibited bronzes by Rodin here in Massillon. So we had 2 bronzes here on display. We had 26,000 visitors in the year of 1940, and look at those shells. Mary Jane, I bet you're very excited about all the cool shells. Yup. And we had a soap carving contest. I don't know what that is, but I want to see that again. So that's going to be my pitch for the thing we bring back for the 90th, is soap carving. And this is like the content, not so much important. It just, I wanted to appreciate that the correspondence between the staff and other people is telegrams. So when we're texting each other and emailing, don't forget where we came from, everybody. All right, so when I said we were a subcommittee of the library, I just want everyone to understand. So it was very hard to make any kind of decisions. So you have the Massillon Board of Education up here that appoints and approves the library board. They approve membership, budget, the director, and they provide services of the clerk treasurer for the museum committee, which we were funded by an intangibles tax. And then we are able to hire our own director, who then is able to hire the part-time staff. So we're like a lot of steps down from like important decision making. So every time that we wanted a budget, we had to go pass it through the library. You know, it was very tough to say why we were important. Case in point, this is a delicious saga. Again, like so much beautiful drama back in the day. So this is the Ellsworth fiasco. I know. If anyone can just imagine their own beautiful, like 1940s, da 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 da. Okay, so in theory, Evelyn Peters Ellsworth, the only thing I could find about her was that she came from the Brooklyn Museum and she published this book on textiles and costumes. That's it. So we, for some reason, brought her here. I'm assuming we were like trying to get some good like New York influence into this museum because, you know, poor Ruth Hubbard moved on because we didn't pay her enough. So along comes Ellsworth. We print all the letterhead. It's got her name all over it. And she was here for 2 months. So I'm like finding this letterhead. I'm like, who is this amazing person who's clearly listed on the letterhead? Oops. Okay, so, all right, it's lengthy. You don't have to read it. Just listen, okay? So the very first report that they make finally is they bring back the staff after the museum has reopened to the public as this two-winged Albrecht and Wilhelm awesomeness. So they've got people there, and they're like, yes, we're going to bring in Miss Evelyn Peters Ellsworth of the Brooklyn Museum. She's going to be hired for the salary of 1 year of $1,800. Boom. And then they wanted to hire Albert Heiss as the assistant director. Yay! He's going to get $500 per year. This is great. Everything's going wonderful. Happy Thanksgiving. So in December, we changed the name to the Massillon Museum, and Miss Ellsworth was present, and she suggested that we should remodel and repair some stuff. All right, cool. So in late December, the budget reports were sent to the library. Again, we were asking for money. Our requests were way too big. So it was plain that it was stated plain that the museum needs to stay within their budget, and given permission to spend $7,600 from the Baldwin Fund for the building. Miss Ellsworth states that the amounts are entirely inadequate, and she asked permission to seek more funding from the Russell Sage Foundation. So in early January, she went back to New York, I'm assuming for the holidays. So she sends a letter to the board asking for a staff of 8 people. We had 2 at the time, that was pushing it. And she needs a budget of $9,000, when really all we were given was $2,000. So they answered her telegram by politely asking her that she not return from New York. I love that so much. Like, maybe you should just stay there. Happy New Year. So then she sent a telegram back that asked for a fair adjustment. And then we responded with a telegram that said, maybe you should resign. So then there was a special meeting held just a few days later where Miss Ellsworth asks for $770 for the time she's already put in. But they finally settled for $300 and part of that expense to keep her in New York. So in January, as Mr. Heiss's duties were increased by the Ellsworth fiasco, his salary was increased to $41.80 per month to $50. So the Ellsworth fiasco. So what I think is interesting is that this is the last time that we had an actual honest-to-goodness named director until Mary Merwin in the 1960s. I don't know if this just like puts such a bad taste in our mouths. We're like, forget it, we'll just let Albert Heiss do it. He and Frank Harrison have got it. And so every time the museum reports to the library, they're like, hey, and it'd be really great if we could have like a qualified real director, please. And then we don't get one. So eventually we would, obviously. All right, so, oh boy, way past. All right. So, we'll move ahead a little bit. So unfortunately, obviously, the museum being affected by, world events, we've got Frank Harrison, who was crucial in those early days. He and Albert Heiss were really the two who made everything happen. He got drafted in 1942, and because he was an artist, we found out years later, because it was a top secret mission, that he was involved in creating kind of a fake army. He was, painting tanks that weren't real tanks to kind of confuse the German army. And sadly, their activities were found out, and he and 700 other soldiers were killed at the time. So in 1955, we dedicated the Harrison Room to him. So many people remember having their classes there at the Harrison Room. But we wanted to honor him as well. So today, because he was a ceramicist, the new ceramics lab here at the Massillon Museum is also dedicated to Frank Harrison. So, and I thank him profusely in my early Massillon book because he did all kinds of Kendall research that I could not have done without him. All right, I'm going to do my interesting tidbits and then I'll stop talking because I don't know. I could talk on forever because there's so much weird stuff. Okay, so we have things in the collection such as wedding cakes. This is a 1919 petit four. Susan Gessner's parents, Mr. and Mrs. Williams, saved that. And we have that upstairs. Great, cool. We had a beehive at one point in time that Margie and Joel Vogt were in charge of taking care of. We had whale ribs, you'll see up there in the right-hand corner, which I always assumed were part of like a Weird Peas collection. But I spoke to a staff member who was there in the 70s and said Mary Merwin went to the beach one day, saw them, strapped them to the top of her car, and drove them home. Dried them in the parking lot for several months. The stench was terrible. But when they were finally sealed up, we put them on display in the science room. So it was a Mary Merwin idea to bring in some whale ribs. If you ever notice, sadly, a lot of this is a little bit covered over now because of renovations. But in this spot at the library, that is actually James Duncan's, like the stone that was outside of his home. Each of these bricks has some significance. There's bricks from North Street School, Charity School of Kendall. Like they all have a place that they all came from. So just wanted to point that out. We did have a lizard, a tarantula. As I understand it, they would leave the tarantula skin in Margie's drawer to scare her, which is pretty great prank. We had Harvey the monkey in the 1970s, a live monkey. Poor little guy, who was probably not very happy with us. We have Oscar the skeleton. We have weird, creepy Stonehead that still has a questionable origin as to whether or not it's like super, super old or it's a hoax. So there's all kinds of fun research surrounding that. We also have our very own, we borrowed our very own space tuna can. The Central States can actually made the can that carried tuna with the astronauts up to the moon. So, go Massillon, Ohio. Bet you didn't know that. Oh, and then there's the picture of them eating it inside the capsule, because that's a thing. One of the other weird, interesting things that we have are plant samples, a variety of plant samples from all kinds of things, but the most interesting are those from Pitcairn Island. One of our early residents, Mayhew Folger, who arrived here in 1813, had been a seal skin seeking captain. He circumnavigated the globe several times, and on one of his trips, he accidentally stumbled upon Pitcairn Island. That is the island where the mutineers from the mutiny on the Bounty landed their ship after they mutinied. They sunk the ship in what is now called Bounty Bay, and they made themselves right at home on the island, unfortunately. But the descendants of those mutineers were there when Mayhew Folger arrived. It actually started a beautiful pen pal relationship between the Folgers and the residents of Pitcairn throughout the rest of their lives. So they sent us photographs, they sent us sun prints of what their breadfruit trees look like, they sent us plant samples of weird sea plants that they have, and then we brought a resident to Massillon, Ohio. So this is one of the descendants of the mutineers of the Mutiny on the Bounty, Parkin Christian, and he came here to Massillon, and they had a big, beautiful party at the Women's Club. So as you can see, you don't need to identify everybody. This is the who's who of everybody in 1958. They're all there around the table, trust me, they just are. And we made up placemats, and we took him to see Mayhew Folger's grave, which was really cool, that we got to have that connection. So those are some of the weird and random awesome things in the collection. Okay, I made it to the 60s, you guys. I feel pretty proud. That's pretty great. So please stay tuned for, I don't know, parts 2, 3, 9. I can do 3 more minutes? Oh, okay. Do we want to do questions, or should I just keep talking? Do you have a question? Go ahead.
Is there a recording of the Keep Massillon on the Map alive for us to hear?
I sang it at the Women's Club during a production, so I'll have to track it down for you. I'm not singing it now because I don't remember it, but it's delicious.
Okay. This program so
Yes.
far that you've done, will it be available online so we could go back and read those articles?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yes.
And if I may briefly, because Mandy mentioned it about the future. I grew up on the west side. My name's Mary Jane. I was Butcher. I was enthralled with the museum as a child. My parents would make us walk home from church, and it was a stop on the way home from church. I was just mesmerized by that seashell collection that was in the MassMu Museum, and it inspired me to take a cardboard gift box from O'Neill's, a nice little gift box, and section it off, and an auntie I had done some traveling, and she brought me seashells. Well, inspired me to create my own museum collection.
I love that
of
so
my
much.
seashells, and go to the library and get a book and make sure I knew the name of every single seashell that I ever had. And I think Mandy would be interested to know if something in your life was inspired by some display inside the museum. And then, that wasn't the only thing, and there were other things too, but that, and I saved that thing for so long.
Absolutely, and we are definitely going to be reaching out and giving everyone an opportunity to tell those kinds of stories throughout this year because we absolutely want to document those. Yep. Rudy.
You still have the telescope that we used to look out of the second floor of the museum to watch the girls coming out of the sugar bowl.
No, we had to burn that. No. Fantastic, Rudy, thank you. Any other questions? Let's see if I could just like plow through this. Let's see. I didn't show any embarrassing photos of Margie, so I feel like I have to do that since she's not here to defend herself. All right. Yep. Some people. Yep. Oh, look, accreditation. Hey, we bought Spring Hill and we helped them to become a thing. Yay. Yay. Okay. Oh, there's one. Yeah. Aw. I know, she's a baby. She started here. Her mother was actually influential in the all of the sidewalk shows. So Margie grew up here too. And then she never left. And then there we have David Schultz. We've got Judy Packley. We've got Paul Von Gutten, who just recently passed away. We've got Bob Dawson on the far right there. Let's see, Trisha Merchant. Jeannie Cooper, Tom Ross, Tommy Wilson. What is it? I think Daryl Cheney is his name. Trish Merchant. Sarita Cunningham there in the front row. So we start to get into like people that we can recognize. Oh, there's another good embarrassing one. It's my favorite. And I did not realize Gary Spangler had started here in 1966. He was here for a very, very long time, and he occasionally still comes back for classes, so that was pretty sweet. And as you can see, we get into these beautiful computer technology moments. We've got a lot of wonderful volunteers. Wendy Little there holding the book. We've got Eric Myers. We've got Nancy Gessner. Leffler, whose first name I am totally, thank you, Barb Leffler. There's a Rudy Turkle. Hey. And you got Butch Hose holding the beautiful 1899 Massillon Tigers sweatshirt. Got Phil Elam. Elam Music loaned us a whole bunch of wonderful jukeboxes for our jukebox exhibit in 1991. There we have Bill Dewald on the top right. He recorded Carl Spooler going through all, I don't even know, 4,000 of his slides. So every single photo that man ever took. We've got Judy Packley helping us with the Massillon School of Nursing collection. That was a major, major collection to come in 1986 when the school closed. So still working to do that justice, but a lot of that is available online. And obviously we had to move out on our own. Hey, so much like previously, we weren't sure where we were gonna go. Sorry, this is my favorite Margie photo of all time. This is my favorite. Just like, hey guys, I'm just archiving some stuff, no big deal. And you got Rudy there on the right because we were running out of space. So we occasionally had to move some things off site. Bless the late Chomstron for letting us use some of his men's shop to display some things in the front windows. But we obviously needed our own space. So what do? They offered us the bank. We talked about moving to the old First Merit building. We talked about staying in the library and the library would go somewhere else or vice versa. So we decided nope, we're gonna go out on our own. So we chose this building. You can kind of see this is one of my favorite details, which they did discover during Streetscape and when they dug the clock. Underground bathrooms, woo! Super great. The best detail of our lawn. So John Clausen and the team, and can please somebody identify this man? He's not Christopher Walken, but John Schwartz? Thank you. Okay, because I keep looking at him, I'm like, why did Christopher Walken help us with this amazing expansion? So I will point out too the beautiful 1991 CAD drawing of our building. Some good stuff. It is totally like a DeLorean just parked outside of the museum. And so Dick and Susan Gessner were the main force behind the Capitol campaign that moved us to the building that we're in. Well, that building, the 31 building. And these are photos that not a lot of people have seen. This is what the building looked like in the lobby of the museum. It was like a dance studio set up. There were several different businesses in there when we took over. And then we had to move like all 100,000 artifacts from up the street down here. So there's still some things that are boxed up in frying chicken boxes and tomato boxes. So it's my goal to one day unpack everything. It's mostly rocks that are sitting in those boxes right now. So they're not getting hurt by anything. And we've got a wonderful team that moved everything into the 3rd floor. We had a museum cafe, obviously quite a different tone than it is today. It was a sweet little cafe. And the planters out front were made by a Boy Scout so that they could plant flowers. And then Dr. Immel donated his circus, which was really, obviously an important part of everybody's visit to the museum today. Hey, look, the steam engine's in the garage. That's pretty cool. Today it lives off-site in its own home, and we've made the arts garden out back for it to live. And I just wanted to point these out. You can tell the history of computers as well when you go through the archives of the museum, because we discovered clip art at some point in time, and they just clip arted everything. So many clip arts. And this guitar is just spectacular. And Alex, I think some of these are ours happening down here. So, yep. So at least it's all of us. Okay, here, wait. I'll end with this because it's super fantastic. Rose, would you mind turning up the volume on this?
Have you visited the new Massillon Museum? The museum welcomes you to its exciting new facility at the corner of Lincoln Way and 1st Street, right in the heart of downtown Massillon. It's open Tuesday through Saturday, 9:30 a.m. to 5 p.m. and Sundays from 2 to 5. There's contemporary art, a sports gallery, Massillon history, a photography gallery, the Immel Circus, and a gift shop and Susan's Museum Cafe. Admission is free, so visit your Massillon Museum today.
Yay! So there you go. So that's the first 60 years, and then Alex and I arrived, and the rest of the staff. The end, happily ever after. Welcome to Gessner Hall. So thank you all so much for being a part of this 90 years that we've been here, and thank you for investing in the future of that so that we can carry on for many, 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 many more years with vigor and immeasurable joy. So thank you.